The next morning, I woke up before the sun, the kind of gray morning where everything feels half asleep, but my mind was already racing. I couldn't get the image of that perfect signature out of my head. I had seen my father's handwriting my whole life. Even when his hands were steady, it was never that straight, never that smooth. It felt wrong, like someone trying to imitate love in neat ink strokes. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. Every sip tasted like anger and guilt. I decided to visit Mr. Holbrook, the lawyer, again. His office sat on the corner of a quiet street lined with maple trees turning orange, the kind of peaceful scene that hides uneasy truths behind it. He looked surprised when I walked in. His assistant tried to tell me I needed an appointment, but I didn't listen. I walked straight into his office and said, "Mr. Holbrook, I need to see the original copy of my father's will and the documents he signed 6 months ago." He hesitated, adjusted his glasses, and said softly, "Emily, I understand this is difficult, but I can't just hand those out." I leaned forward, my voice trembling but firm. "You don't need to hand them out. I just need to see them, please." He sighed, probably realizing I wouldn't leave otherwise, and pulled out a thick file from the cabinet, laying it gently on the table. As he opened it, I noticed a date on the bottom corner, the same one from the hospital record, a week after Dad had come home from a minor stroke. My stomach tightened. My father had been weak, barely able to hold a pen. How could he have signed a stack of legal papers perfectly? I asked Mr. Holbrook if he'd personally witnessed Dad's signing. He hesitated again, then said, "Daniel brought the papers home. Your father signed them there. I received them later with notarization." I felt my knees go weak. The pieces were starting to fit together. Daniel had taken control when Dad was vulnerable, convinced him to sign things he probably didn't fully understand, maybe even forged parts of it. I thanked the lawyer and left before I said something I couldn't take back. Outside, the cold wind hit my face, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about dignity, about how easily people take advantage of love and trust when they think no one will notice. That night, I called a friend of mine, Lisa. She worked in a small law firm downtown, someone who understood things beyond emotions. I told her everything, every line, every detail. She listened quietly, then said, "Emily, if the signature looks fake, you can request a handwriting verification. And if your brother managed any documents while your father was under medical care, there might be grounds for contesting the will." Her words gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. Not the naive kind, but the kind that comes when you realize you're not powerless. The next few days became a blur of paperwork, appointments, and late nights with coffee cups and highlighters. I found Dad's old insurance files, bank statements, and letters. I traced the timeline, and the more I looked, the clearer it became that Daniel had orchestrated everything, slowly, subtly, using Dad's illness and my distance as cover. He had always been the golden child, the one who stayed behind, helped with the business, handled the bills, while I chased my career in Chicago. I had trusted him completely, and that trust had been his weapon. Then came the call that made my blood run cold. An unknown number, a woman's voice, shaky. "Are you Emily Miller?" she asked. I said yes. She hesitated, then whispered, "I used to work for your father at Miller Construction, and I think you should know something about your brother." I met her the next day in a small cafe outside town. She was nervous, constantly looking around. She told me she had been Daniel's assistant for 3 years, and that 6 months before Dad died, Daniel had asked her to prepare transfer forms and witness a few signatures. She said he told her it was just business restructuring, but later she overheard him bragging on the phone that Emily won't see a dime. I felt the world tilt under my feet. It was true. Every instinct I had was right. My brother had used our father's trust to steal not just money, but my place in the family legacy. When I asked the woman if she'd testify or give a written statement, she nodded nervously. "I quit that job because of what I heard. It didn't feel right," she said. "I'll help however I can." That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by piles of documents, the notebook, the photo of Dad smiling at the lake cabin, and I realized that this fight wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about not letting manipulation rewrite love. I opened my laptop, started typing an official request to contest the will, and for the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt something like peace, not because the pain was gone, but because I finally had direction. As I hit send, I whispered to myself, "Dad, this is for you." And somewhere deep inside, I felt like he was listening. The day the court accepted my petition to contest the will, the air outside felt heavier, like the world itself had paused to listen. I stood on the courthouse steps holding the stamped papers, the city buzzing around me, cars moving, people laughing, all of them living ordinary lives while mine was unfolding like a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. I took a deep breath and told myself that backing down was no longer an option. Daniel found out 2 days later. He called me in the middle of the night, his voice sharp, cold, the kind of tone that strips away the memory of brotherly love. "What do you think you're doing, Emily?" he snapped. "Dad made his decision. You're just embarrassing yourself." I wanted to cry, but instead I said quietly, "Then let's find out if Dad really made that decision." And I hung up before he could answer. The next weeks were chaos, depositions, documents, meetings, people asking questions that felt like knives. Every piece of paper was a memory being examined under fluorescent lights. I met with Lisa every evening in her office. We spread out evidence across her desk, the forged signature samples, the witness statement from Daniel's assistant, even old photos of Dad's shaky handwriting near the end of his life. Every detail mattered. Every comma in those documents was a clue. Daniel, of course, lawyered up. His attorney tried to paint me as the distant daughter who only cared about money. I sat in the hearing room, listening to them describe me like I was a stranger, my hands gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. But I didn't interrupt. I just kept my eyes on Daniel, sitting across from me, his expression unreadable, but his leg kept bouncing under the table, a small nervous rhythm that told me he wasn't as calm as he pretended. Then came the handwriting expert, an older man with careful eyes. He compared the original signatures on the will with verified samples from Dad's medical records and letters. When he looked up and said, "There are clear inconsistencies. This appears to have been traced or digitally lifted," my heart nearly stopped. Lisa squeezed my arm gently under the table, and for the first time, Daniel looked down. Outside the courthouse, the sky opened up in a drizzle, light rain falling on the concrete. I tilted my face up and let it wash over me. It felt like something was being cleansed, not the pain, but the helplessness that had chained me for months. But victory wasn't that simple. Daniel wasn't giving up. He called Mom's old friends, tried to turn the few relatives we had left against me, spreading stories about how I wanted to destroy the family name. One aunt even called me crying, asking why I couldn't just let things be. I told her quietly, "Because if I let lies stand, then love means nothing." She didn't answer, but I could hear her sob quietly before hanging up. During those weeks, I found myself visiting Dad's grave more often, sitting there under the old oak tree, talking softly about the case, about the nights I couldn't sleep, about how much I missed him. Sometimes I imagined his voice answering, telling me to stay strong. Other times, I just cried until I couldn't anymore, grief and determination blending into one heavy breath. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Mr. Holbrook, the lawyer. He wanted to meet privately. When I sat across from him again in his quiet office, he looked older, tired, and he said something that changed everything. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I checked my files. There was an envelope your father left that was never opened. It wasn't part of the official will." He told me to give it to his children together after his passing, but Daniel insisted on taking care of it himself. I realize now that was a mistake. He handed me a worn brown envelope sealed with Dad's handwriting across the front. It said simply, "For my kids." I held it like it was something sacred. When I opened it later at home, there was a short letter. The ink faded slightly, but the words clear. "Daniel, Emily, you both are my pride. I know I haven't been perfect, but my hope is that you take care of each other more than the things I leave behind. Money will fade, property will age, but the way you treat each other will outlive us all. Remember that. The real inheritance I leave you is love. Use it well." I read it over and over until the paper was damp with tears. Dad had trusted us both, and Daniel had broken that trust.